political system and the way that our economy is reacting. That sense of uncertainty, when I talk to business leaders, they say a couple of things. The uncertainty exists because we don't know what government is going to do next. We see an unsustainable debt picture, the accumulation of debt, spending. We don't see bipartisan agreement. We see a response to the excesses of Wall Street, with what a lot of business leaders see as an accumulation of excessive regulation that could depress growth. Again, that's a debatable point. But it is that sense that we don't know what Washington's really going to do next. I don't want to leave out us now, the media, and where we're culpable for this. What worries me about where we are and our contribution to it is that we're often not very constructive. We're often not very edifying. What we are is polemical. We're engaged in argument, circular argument that becomes like a whirlwind. And what that creates for you as consumers of news is a viewpoint on demand. So if you hate President Obama or if you hate President Bush, you've got a few outlets you can go to right away. And you can get your point of view validated. You can get new information to support it. You can get additional talking points. You can be a hit at dinner that night. Because you watch some people on my network, other networks, you're going to get all the information you need to haul off on the other side. The media has become so polarized in itself that we're losing that room for perspective, for what I think are thoughtful questions, for real debate about really hard issues, and for some focus on solutions. You know, what I try to do with my program, which I think is an incredibly important institution, it's much bigger than me. I'm the current custodian of it, as Tim Russert used to say, is to ask tough questions, to try to get to real answers. I don't feel that I'm always successful, but I'm always trying, but to try to elevate the conversation to get to some bigger points, to get to the real debate, to try to understand how we solve some of these things, and to get people talking to one another in a different way. You know, I have had, and I'll sound a little competitive here, but unlike my competitors, I started putting on members of the Tea Party, new faces that you hadn't seen before, members of Congress. I had them on my round table, alongside an Alan Greenspan, or a Rachel Maddow, or a David Brooks. We had a debate. We heard from them. Not in sound bites, but we had a real conversation to understand where they're coming from and how you get to some point of resolution. But because we're so divided in the media, it doesn't help. And because we're covering events, be it politics, be it the market, the way we cover sports, that instant scrutiny does not allow for much deliberation, much thoughtfulness, and frankly, I don't think it helps the cause of leadership. Because it makes more deliberative leadership more difficult. Leadership becomes more reactive. Leadership becomes more risk-averse. What did people say about George W. Bush? He promised to be a uniter, not a divider. Well, that didn't work out so well. What did Barack Obama promise? Promise to change the way Washington works. Do you agree? Is this the change that you thought it would be? Because if this is Washington, the way it's supposed to work, I don't want to see when it's not going to work. So I think we know what the real answer is, that it's a really hard problem to fix. We're part of it, the media, we're part of it as citizens and voters. But the politicians themselves, through structural reasons, and because of a lack of courage, are unwilling to take on the more difficult choices and act like statesmen and women. I want to get to your questions, but I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about the campaign, because there's so much happening there. So there's two, by the way, as I'm sweating like this, I just want to apologize. I tend to perspire, and these lights are about 5,000 degrees. But it reminds me of, I must be a mess. So honestly, there's nothing I can do. Thankfully, there's a sea breeze. Not here. Not here. There's a sea breeze somewhere. Well, they say Nantucket's changed a great deal. Apparently, it's become Miami. I didn't realize that. I was was once interviewing Laura Bush, First Lady, on her plane, and it was actually a situation similar to this, where it was 400 or 500 degrees. And they turned off the air conditioning, and I started questioning her, and I became like this. She, by the way, did not perspire because she lives in Texas, so they're used to this and they don't perspire. And I'm perspiring like this, and I said to her, Mrs. Bush, I just want to apologize. I'm apparently building under my own question. So, let me just say a couple of things about the campaign. So, two competing narratives here. Oh, but I have to say one thing before I get off the Washington's message. So, I had David Bluff on, the president's senior advisor, who's actually a brilliant political strategist. He ran his election campaign, he'll run the re-election. But he said to me about after they got this debt deal, he said, I really think this has been a healthy debate for the country.
What?
And one of the things I've tried to do in this role, I'm trying, whether you think I've been successful or not, but I actually do try to listen to what they say. And that was one where I listened and I thought, no, you didn't just say. This is a healthy debate for the country. And I said to him, exactly which part was the healthy part? Because I'm feeling, I think the country is on the verge of a heart attack, and I'm just wondering which part you felt was healthy. Anyway, which gets us into the really healthy part of our democracy, and that's the campaign. So, the good news is that campaign financing is under control. Because they're only going to spend, I think, $1 billion in 2012. So that's good. So that part's under control. The competing narratives are actually, if you had done some time travel, or if you had gone on one of the charter flights to Mars that I think they're offering, and been gone for a while, it's really going to be the same debate. So the competing narratives are that President Obama is the adult in the room. He's a pragmatist. He's willing to negotiate. He's trying to change the ways of Washington, but he has no partner. He has no partner to do this. The economy was so bad, it wasn't even as bad as he realized when he came in, and things could have been a lot worse. He killed Osama bin Laden, which, by the way, is no small thing, but apparently people forget about that. And that this is the trajectory, that he's going to win the future. Republicans are going to argue, basically, have you checked your 401k? Which is actually not fair. I mean, the stock market, believe it or not, is up over the president's term thus far, but it's only Monday. So, but the point is, people are out of work. There has not been a president who has been elected since FDR when unemployment is above 8%. So history does not look good from that point of view. Republicans are going to carry the debt fight forward. The fight over spending is going to be carried forward. And I think that you're going to see from Democrats the same fight over entitlements and, taxes for the rich and, impacting the middle class. So the contours of this are very much the same. So who's the Republican nominee? Well, that's easy. That's going to be, I don't know. Basically, you've got two brackets to follow. You have the establishment bracket and you have the I don't know what to call them. No, the populist bracket. So Tea Party / populist. So what you've got here is Romney and Huntsman. Look, Romney's got money. He's got staying power. He's got experience. He's done this before. The economy should be his strong suit. I don't think it was exactly a profile encouraged to stay totally away from the debate and then say he would be against the Boehner plan. It's very convenient when you don't have to vote on it. And by the way, I think I'm going to be interviewing Michelle Bachmann on Sunday in Iowa, and I plan to ask her, who also opposed the debt limit raising plan. It's easy to say you'll vote against it when you know it's going to pass. Tell me you're going to vote against it if you're the deciding vote. And tell me how much of the financial calamity that we're now experiencing you would be willing to accept when it would have been so much worse had we actually defaulted on August 2nd. Because I want to know from our potential leaders how much they're willing to absorb on behalf of the American people. I think that's interesting information. So that's Romney. Huntsman is an interesting figure. I think in this Republican primary climate, having anything to do with Barack Obama is a negative. It's going to be difficult. He has not really caught fire so far since making his announcement. He gave a quote to Ryan Lizza of the New Yorker about how grueling the campaign is. He's only been in for 48 days. But those are the kinds of things that can hurt you. But they're going to really duke it up. And the plan there is pretty straightforward. Whoever wins New Hampshire has got to go to the South and win there. If Huntsman can stop Romney in New Hampshire, he's got a real shot. The more interesting side is kind of the other bracket going on the Republican side. So Rick Perry is going to get in, who's the governor of Texas. He's going to announce, it looks like, in South Carolina on Saturday. He led the prayer rally on Saturday. I'm sure he's going to be a huge hit in the Northeast. So, because really being governor from Texas is something that I think a lot of liberals are eager to rally around. Alex Castellanos, who's a Republican strategist who worked for Romney, sort of captured the feeling about Perry that actually is held within the Bush camp, which is he's George W. Bush without the brains. So, but what are the upsides to Perry? I mean, these are real. He talked about seceding from the Union. He talked about that he's got Tea Party credentials, and he's got a strong economy in Texas, a real strong economy, and he's coming from a huge Republican state. It's a real advantage because don't forget the overhang here, and that is that Republican primary voters are not very excited about their candidates thus far. There's a lot of big money in the Republican Party still on the sidelines, waiting for somebody to come in. I mean, they really are still waiting for Chris Christie or for somebody. But I don't think that's going to happen. And you might wonder whether the Haley Barbers and the Mitch Daniels and folks like that now regret that they didn't get in at a point when President Obama looks increasingly vulnerable. But you've got Rick Perry and Michelle Bachmann. Now, let me just say something to the large liberal institutional complex, some of which includes the media and others. You know, there was this picture of Michelle Bachmann on the cover of Newsweek that makes her look kind of bug-eyed and look crazy. And there is a feeling among a lot of liberals that I talked to, and I saw it going back to when Governor Bush was running for president. And they would say things like, he's crazy. He, God will tell him what to do. What's he ever read? And it is that kind of liberal arrogance that leads to complacency and leads to losing, if you hadn't noticed. Now, I think it's worth keeping that in mind, as there are a lot of people, be them, in the journalistic ranks or just among citizens, who so easily cast aside folks and say, well, nobody's going to pay attention to them. I beg to differ with you. I mean, Michelle Bachmann right now, I don't think has a great chance of the nomination. She has a real good chance of winning Iowa. Don't forget, 66% of caucus goers in Iowa are evangelical Christians. So she's going to have social bona fides on socially conservative issues. She's also, head of the Tea Party caucus, so she's going to be, up front on a lot of the debt issues. Mitt Romney still has the health care issue from Massachusetts. So this is going to be the dynamic. You're going to have the establishment guys against the populist figures. It's probably going to be 2-on-2, and it's going to be very interesting to watch. Now, the conventional wisdom would say establishment always wins out, and Romney's likely to be the nominee, and that's what the White House now thinks. There are some dissenters within the White House, though, who think the Tea Party is being underestimated, similar to Goldwater in '64, and that the Republican Party may ultimately go in that direction. The White House hopes that is the case. They would certainly love to run against Michelle Bachmann or Rick Perry. But while they may not look like very strong general election candidates, they are, I think, threats to make a lot of noise in the nomination. I am watching with great interest just how the Republican Party sorts this out. Because there is a great sorting out period going on from the last decade on the Republican side. And navigating those two ends while still trying to preserve independent voters is going to be very difficult. This is what President Obama is really, everything you see him doing is about corralling those independent voters who he has lost, keeping them in his fold. And remember, as bad as things are right now, the president has a 42% approval rating, 50% disapproval, but he's still got 42%. So he's on the cusp. It's pretty remarkable that he's as high as he is, given how bad the economy is. So those are what I think the contours are of the campaign. And before I take your questions, I worry in a talk like this that we are too negative. But I just all want us to remember, as I do, with my young kids and my wife, when we're at Surfside or Ladies Beach and the sun's going down and the kids say just 5 more minutes, that we are on this place that God has touched and leaves us smiling. And in the summer winds, let us still be optimistic, believe in our system, and be constructive but vocal participants. So thank you very much. We're going to encourage people to come down to the mics. I'm going to try to be brief so we can kind of get through this. Again, I'm sure you have a lot on your mind. Let's try to ask questions. I mean, if you want to berate me, that's fine. That happens sometimes. But anyway, so let's just try to keep it